All right. So we're so excited today to have Davin Bell here with us in his presentation called Let's Talk Money. He's a financial advisor with a focus on dental professionals, and he's coming to speak with us today about professionalism, leadership, practice ownership, how to address student debt, and how to deal with the financial landscape of dentistry, with it being of the utmost importance for us as dental students in our careers. Thank you so much for joining us today, Davin, and we're excited to get into this topic.
Absolutely, Jessica. Thanks for having me. And just, I'll fill in some gaps, because naturally when people hear financial advisor, I'm deeply passionate about the career, but the Bernie Madoffs of the world don't help our cause. So when people are a little hesitant, but I'm really excited to be here today. I've had the privilege of working with dentists for 2 decades, and I've seen them make really good decisions. And I've seen them with good intention, but the results actually didn't turn out the way they did. So I think that at where you are, if you're in dental school or in residency, this is timely, because you can't rewind the clock. So I look forward to working through some really big topics with you guys today. So thanks for the invitation.
So Davin, could you talk to us about what the top things are that we need to know about being financially smart as a student or a new dentist out of school?
Great question. I often refer to it as financial health. When someone says, all right, I want to make sure that I'm just healthy, there's certain things you do. You have to eat right and exercise. You can't just exercise but not eat right. And when it comes to finances, in particular, when you're in school, it's a little bit of like treading water. And so I wouldn't want someone, because if finances is so emotional, right? Even you look at grown adults who've been investing for years and years, one little twitch of the market and we kind of lose our grip. There's like this visceral emotional reaction because you work so hard for your money. And dental students, what can happen is every time you look at your student loan balance go from 100 to 200 to 500, it really can, it can be almost demoralizing. But there's a couple things. I encourage dental students to think in the long term. And what I mean by that is, if someone comes out with 500,000 of student loans, I've seen 900,000 of student loans. So there isn't anything that shocks me anymore. But I always remind dental students that if you come out and let's just say your average income in your first 10 years, now when you first come out to make 100, 120, well done. But let's just say that your average income is 180,000 between the first through the 10th year. That means the return on your investment on that 500,000 with interest, of course. But if you think about it, that's 180,000 that's going to course through your checking account. That's $1.8 million that your checking account is going to see in the first 10 years of working. So I'm not necessarily concerned that you're going to be able to pay off your student loans. The questions, or that the dental students and residents should be focused on, is when is it optimal? And we can kind of explore that a little bit later on. So trying to get in a cash position can be very difficult. The things to be thinking about is once you are in your first 1 to 2 years, those are the first critical years. So get through dental school and residency. It's very difficult to make some intricate financial moves, other than if there's excess. I can't emphasize enough the importance of cash. So if someone says, I have an extra $2,000 in my student loan, should I just give it back? Should I throw it to my student loan balance? Don't forget, there is a transition from leaving training and then into what I'll just call working years. Not that you're not working in dental or residency, but there's licensing and malpractice, and you might move to a different city. So cash is of the utmost importance. So that, as a dental student or resident, any opportunity to sit on cash is a good opportunity.
So I have another question for you.
Please.
So this one talks about student loans.
Yeah.
Do you have a plan that you recommend for students, including none, just paying it off, that you recommend?
Yeah, excellent question. I'll tell you, the first thing that I would tell you, and again, I'm an independent advisor, so I don't work for a bank. I don't work for a mutual fund company or even an insurance company. I am independent. And I'll tell you, the landscape of options, things like working for a hospital so that in 10 years you can get your student loans paid off or forgiven. And just as a clarification, because I hear this a lot, when they say your student loans are going to be forgiven, it's not in the biblical sense. I think sometimes people can be surprised. They're like, wait, they're not forgiven as like, we forgive you, go on your way. A forgiveness means you accept that as a tax bill in the year your loans are forgiven. And so if you have $180,000 of student loans that are forgiven, the IRS is going to make it look like you just earned $180,000 that year in taxes. So you might have a $60,000 tax bill. So they're shifting that from the student loan program to the IRS. And the IRS tends to be a little more aggressive. You start hearing things like garnishing wages and so forth. So on a broad scale, and then I'll go into some more detail, but on a broad scale, I would say that when it comes to your career choice, make sure that if you're going to work for, a hospital that has a 10-year or any program, any facility, I'll just say facility. If you're going to work for a facility that says, hey, work for us for 10 years, do it because the mission of the hospital or that facility is important to you, not because the student loans are going to be forgiven. Because as you know, through 4 years of dental school, you go out 4 years of working privately, it feels like 8 or 9. And I don't know that there's just great professional satisfaction. In 20 years, I've yet to see a dentist say, I'm just glad I ran that gauntlet just to get my student loans paid for. So make the decision first. Like, does that align with you professionally? It should be, oh, by the way, that facility will forgive your loans. Okay, so with that backdrop, so much will change in your first 4 years. You might be looking at buying a house. That will impact what you do with your student loans. You might be taking out a business loan. That will impact your student loan decisions. So making decisions such as, once you finish all training, now you're out. Once you finish, a lot of your peers in the first year will go on an income-based repayment. Now, again, big asterisks. Talk to somebody and make sure that those decisions are in alignment. But generally speaking, just to give you a feel of what your peers have done pre-COVID, because COVID's kind of thrown a big, it's changed it, right? With no one has to pay on their federal loans until the end of January. That could change again. It was August. But most of your peer group, if once things tend to normalize, they'll go on an income-based repayment or pay as you earn. And the reason is, the year in which you graduate, it might be May of 2022 as an example. So when you start working, July, best case, but August, September, you're only going to have 4 or 5 months worth of earnings. Therefore, your student loan payment will be low. That's an advantage to you because you can spend the time to build up cash, to get to like a healthy emergency reserve. But once that full calendar year of you working privately, now all of a sudden that income-based repayment is going to really skyrocket, right? The direct loans, they're going to say, oh, wow, Jessica, you did really well. So now your minimum payment, just jumped. So it's in that first full calendar year that you will see your peer group. They will go to potentially a private bank, like as an example, SoFi, Laurel Road, DR Bank. These are legitimate banks. Earnest is another one. And they love dental loans because you guys are good at paying them back. But the strategy is this. You will see your peer take all their student loans and they'll consolidate them with that private bank. And then they'll tell the private bank, stretch these out 20 years. And the reason is they want the mandatory minimum payment as low as possible. You will probably pay them off a lot sooner, but they're trying to stretch this out. And it's for this reason. Because when you go to a bank and say, I need another $500,000 to open my practice or to buy into this practice, or $1 million, or whatever the number is, they're going to say, okay, well, we're looking at your income today and we're looking at your debt to income, meaning on a monthly basis, you have this student loan with direct loans, which is fine, but it's on a 10-year window. So therefore, your minimum payment is much higher. So we're a little nervous about giving you this loan, or your interest rate's going to be a little higher. Same thing with a mortgage. They'll say you probably would qualify for a high mortgage because of your income, but we're a little nervous with your student loan payment. And then you put our mortgage payment on top of that. So all of a sudden, it's going to be tough to qualify, or you'll have a higher interest payment. So you'll see your peer group set the table to say, let's stretch this out. So I have a low minimum payment. Again, you'll probably pay it off sooner. You just don't need to tell the bank that. Okay. Now, what's the one concern when you take your loans away from the federal program and you move it to a private bank? The perception is you're going to lose all the benefits. Like, what about deferment and right, or forgiveness at death? Well, you're right. You'll lose deferment, but most of those banks will forgive loans at death. So that used to be kind of a fear. Like, what if I die and it's a private loan? Then my significant others or loved ones have to, they're going to have to pay on this. It will be forgiven. I mean, there'll be a tax bill. But yes, things like deferment, when you're a private dentist working and you're making six figures, deferment forbearance isn't for you anymore. You won't even qualify for that. So your income kind of boots you out of those special kind of privileges when you're a student, and deferment is important to you, deferment and forbearance.
So Davin, how would you say that you would balance paying off student loans, buying a practice, maybe you don't even have a car when you graduate, buying a car, and then stashing away extra cash for retirement? Because we hear all the time that we need to put away for retirement as early as possible. How would you say we would go about doing all this at our minimal income, straight out of school, during that time period that you mentioned when you should be building that cash?
Yeah. Okay, Kel. So this is an excellent question. So this is where we can really kind of get into some strategies. What do dentists really do? And so I'm going to kind of lay out some principles to financial health. Like what are the things to be ever mindful of, despite the fact that student loans, we talk about emotions. Student loans, any loan for that matter, credit card debt, student loan debt, business debt, it's an irritant. It's inflammatory. People lose sleep over debt. I've seen people lose relationships over debt. I've seen people lose practices over debt if we mismanage debt. So how do we get to a point where we can kind of quiet that noise, and despite what balances you have, you feel like you're in control of your finances? So I went back and I looked at 2 decades of dentists and said, okay, well, who are the ones that just were disciplined and they got to a point where they were practicing because they want to? Not many, like 28, 29, 30, 31-year-old dentists, we say, yeah, I need to save for retirement. But I mean, you just got into this career. Now all of a sudden we're supposed to be thinking about retiring. So that's not as motivating as the dentist, orthodontist, periodontist, pediatric dentist who says, it would be actually quite empowering to be in a position to go to the clinic and see patients because I want to. That's pretty bad. So what's the playbook? Well, it turns out that dentists that are in a good position financially actually aren't great budgeters. It wasn't like they were great stock pickers early on. They put money in the stock market and they bought Bitcoin or something to that effect. Budgeting actually doesn't even really work. When young couples in particular come to me and say, if we could budget, I know we could save more. And we hear that all the time. If we could just figure out the budget. Sounds logical. It's actually backwards, right? If we're really saying if we just spent less. In fact, that's what happens passively is the significant other says, if they spent less, I know we would be in a different position. So a rallying cry is this. It's you must start saving right out of the gates. And here's the key. And I'm going to give you a big number. You must save 20% of your gross income. That's before taxes. So if you're making $200,000, then you got to save 20%. That's $40,000 a year. Now the IRS still has to come in and take a big hit out of that. You still have to make your student loan payment. You still have to, right? So, but the dentist who saves 20% of their gross income for 20 years, can retire and expect the same level of lifestyle, or can choose to keep working because they want to. It's 20%. Now, most of the online stuff you see is save 10% of your income. And I work with people in Manhattan, San Francisco. 20% is a big number. It doesn't include what you might save on a pre-tax basis in a 401k plan or a SEP IRA or anything else. That doesn't count. And the reason is because when you're saving on a pre-tax basis in those retirement plans, when you pull it out, you still owe taxes. So we don't know what that burden's going to be. So Kel, here's your first step. You're saving 20%. That must come home to a cash position first, not an investment. So your first, year to 2 years, it takes the average dentist, resident fellow, it takes about 2 years to get in a good, solid 6-month emergency reserve. That's your first okay check. And a 6-month reserve meaning, what does it take to run your household? So what's your rent or your mortgage, student loan payment, car payment, grocery bill, cell phone bill, add it all up, times 6. This was pressure tested in a very big way in March, April, May of 2020. You had perfectly healthy dentists. And all of a sudden, at the time it was called Corona, nobody knows what was going on. And then all of a sudden the ADA says, we recommend you shut down your offices. I've got dentists from across the country saying, I can't believe I'm locking the doors to my office. I mean, except for emergent care. But I've got 6 months where I could maintain everything. Now, of course, you're going to make adjustments, but I have 6 months where I could take 0 paychecks. So if you were off for a month and a half, or revenue is disrupted as you're trying to get patients' confidence back, 6 months is your top priority, not actually starting to pay down debt. When you're sitting on 6 months, some people after 2020 are like, maybe I need to be at 7 or 8. But when you're sitting on a 6-month reserve, now you can start to think clearly. That's the calming effect. That's why they call it cold cash. It's a kind of calms it down. You can sleep well. Now the 20% savings, once I have my 6-month reserve, now I have to tackle debt. And it turns out there's 2 types of debt in your world, just 2. And there's a rule, and you'll find that this rule, that it'll fall on either side of the category. Your peer group who does well financially uses something called the 8% rule. And here's what that means. Any debt charging you 8%, 9% and above, you use that 20% off of your savings. Don't invest it. You've got your cash, attack that debt. But any debt at 7, 6, 5, or 3, like mortgages today, that is probably going to be on a schedule. Follow the schedule. That includes student loans. Because that 20%, once you've gotten rid of that high interest debt, that is sacred. That is yours. That must be set aside, invested for your future so that you can even just spend money in the future. Because it turns out when it comes to investing, it is important what you select, like mutual funds. That's important. But time is actually more important. Time. This is something you never read about in the Wall Street Journal, which I'm a religious leader every day. And I'm like, nope, again, wasn't in there. Or, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, or all these great books that are out there, YouTube. Nobody talks about time value of money, which simply means the sooner you start when it comes to investing, when you're in the position, you have a 6-month reserve, you got rid of high interest debt. Once you start saving, the longer that can incubate, the better you will do. The trapdoor is, but my student loans, if I could just get rid of my loans, then I could start saving and investing. But you're taking up too much time because this time value of money. And I've got, Kel, I've got an example of 2 dentists, one who starts saving early and one who pays down their debt first. I've got examples that I'd be more than happy to share because that usually when someone satisfies the debt, I was just talking with a couple out in North Carolina, remain nameless just to protect them, but both dentists, and they had their second child, and they're older. I mean, they're early 40s, had their second child, And that child is 4 months old. So he entered daycare and they said, my goodness, our daycare bill is $2,400 a month. Parents aren't going to skimp on daycare. Not a good idea, right? So $2,400 a month. As we get older, our lives tend to get a little more expensive, get a little more complex. So when people satisfy a debt, our intention is, oh, I'll just use that to save in my student, or I'll invest. Doesn't always work that way. It's an assumption. It's kind of a dangerous one. Can I share that attachment, Kel? Would this be an appropriate time to share that example?
Yeah, I think that's great.
Okay, so let me get my glasses on here. I'm going to share my screen, and let's take a look at this. This is so powerful, you guys. Okay, I'm hoping my screen is showing up for you guys. Okay, so we're going to look at, let's pressure test this together. Time value of money. And anybody who's watching this recording, I can make sure Cal or Eric, Jessica, you guys can get this so that anybody can look at this. So here's what we're going to look at. 2 dentists. They both went to the same dental school. They both come out with the same student loans. They both join the same dental practice. So everything's going to be the same. The only difference is one chooses to start saving earlier and the other one chooses to pay down her debt first. It's not wrong to pay down your debt first. This isn't a moral argument. This isn't a right or wrong. The question when it comes to debt is what is optimal? That's what we're always having to grapple with. Okay. So let's, and when they're investing, by the way, they're investing, I'm showing a retirement account in this example, a retirement account. The reason is because when you earn interest on any type of an investment account, you have to pay taxes. And everyone's tax situation is going to be a little bit different. So I'm really leveling the field. Everything is the same. And I'm using an 8% rate of return. Now, this will be the first, 8%. Well, that's because why do you think the market's going to do 8%, David? In fact, we really don't know what the stock market's going to do on Monday, much less next year or for the next decade. But I did have to use a rate of return just for the example. So I went back 30 years and up to last Friday, and the market's averaged a little over 8%. This is the first trap door that a lot of dentists will fall into. They'll say, Davin, but my student loans are at 7%. And I don't think the market's going to do 7%. That's just, I talked to my dad and my uncle, and we've got cash in the basement and bullets ready to go. I just don't think it's going to happen. Well, you can't compare a fixed 7% student loan against an average variable interest rate. They really shouldn't be compared. It's not about comparing. And using an 8% average, dentists, you guys are better at math than even I would be. But don't forget, here's an average, because I don't think the market's going to do 8 either. But average means in calendar year 2020, if the stock market did 16%, in calendar year 2021, the market did 0. Next year, I would say, well, that's an average of 8 over 2 years. The question was, were you in both years to get the average? So you're right. I don't think in any given year, the market's going to do 8. It's over the course of time. So let's take a look at this. I have a 31-year-old dentist, and she comes to me and says, all right, Davin, I've got a 6-month reserve. I've been saving my 20%. Good. I got rid of all my high interest debt. Excellent. Emotionally, I want to keep going. I mean, everything I'm hearing and seeing is keep going on my debt. But I think if I start saving earlier, I know that I'll be doing better in the long run. So she does. So $24,000 into the retirement account. She does this for the first 10 years until she's 40. It took discipline, but she did it. And so that's a total of $240,000. Great job. Now, her good friend who went to the same dental school, has the same student loan balance, joined the same practice, said, I can't do it. I got to go all in on this. I'm going all in. And as a result, Davin, I will pay less interest than my friend. And that's correct. She would be right. She will pay less interest. She's using time to pay less interest, not save on interest. The bank will say, if you give us more money today, you'll save on interest. No, that's wrong. You will pay less, but paying less doesn't mean there's a savings there. Okay. All right. So she goes all debt, all in. She's now debt-free, probably had a debt elimination party. And now she's 41 and says, now I can start saving $2,000 a month, $24,000 a year. And she does this for the next 25 years. Incredible discipline. That's $600,000, a full $360,000 more than her good friend. Now, they just turned 65 a month ago. They both decided to retire. So they go to lunch. Somehow I get invited. Maybe I'm picking up the tab. And the dentist on the right opens up her retirement account balance and proudly declares that she's got $1,894,000. Now she knows her good friend hasn't saved in 25 years. She's thinking, this is going to be a bloodbath. She's going to have to like move in with me. This is a disaster. And her friend opens it up and she proudly declares that she has $2,571,000. Now the dentist on the right's thinking, wait a second. What sort of black magic is this? We invested in the same mutual fund. We got the exact same rate of return. How is it I've saved for 25 years that I have $600,000 less than? She saved $360,000 more. That's a $900,000 swing. If I'm at this lunch, I'm going to ask, whoops, didn't mean to highlight so much. I'm going to ask one question. When was your last deposit? When was your last deposit? And she's going to say, well, what do you mean? I just turned 65 a month ago. I made my last deposit and then we decided to retire. That's the difference. That's the difference. Her last deposit was last month. Our good friend and client's last deposit was 25 years ago. It's had 25 years to bang around. If all of you could go back 25 years and make a deposit in the market, you would. You wouldn't have even argued. You'd say, absolutely, I'm going to do it. So it's had 25 years to go up 16 and go down 0, go negative 10, go positive 10. It's super messy. The market is never clean and easy. It's very messy, but that's where she's better off. Now, here's where I think paying off all your debts first is super aggressive advice. And you see it all the time. Just get rid of your debts and then start saving. This is why retirement is a national debate, because people do this with great intention. I have a 47-year-old dentist who in April of 2020, because of COVID, closed down her office, said, I know that I'm normally saving $2,000 a month, but for the month of April and May, I'm not gonna be able to save. I don't have the same patient, volume. No, I understand, no problem. So you would have to subtract just $4,000 here at age 47. What if at age 57, she calls me again and says, and I'm hoping there's not another pandemic, but let's say that she calls me again and said, hey, I had that carpal tunnel issue. Remember, I got it fixed. I got to recover for this next month or two. So I can't save for these next 2 months, but then I'll be back at it. Got it. So if life intervenes, you'd have to remove $8,000 out of this equation. She would not have 1.894. It would be way worse. The reality is when you pay your debt first, you must run the gauntlet. You have to save more. And as an advisor, I would never say, take a break for 25 years. If they're a client of mine, they're going to keep saving. But you're stacking the deck against you. You so much as have any disruption in your control or out of your control, like every dentist in the country closing their offices for at least a month, some depending on where you live, 2.5 months, that's a disruption. And you may not be able to save. So it's Kel, to get back to your original question, and I'll stop the share, but to get back to your original question of what should we be mindful of, I would say your core principles of financial health are going to be a 20% savings. Use that 8% rule to eliminate high interest debt. And then that is sacred. You must start saving responsibly for yourself. You can be aggressive on student loans. Oftentimes people will hear me speak and say, so just kind of make the normal payments. No, but you have to shrink your lifestyle to be more aggressive on student loans. It's not an either or, either pay debt or save. It is a both. It's the genius of the and. And if you can be disciplined in saving early, it's stunning. It really is stunning on the difference that you can make for yourself. But it requires discipline of the highest order. It's probably the greatest mental gymnastics that doctors generally have to do with respect to debt, and that includes business debt, mortgage debt, car debt, student loan debt, against their savings, because it feels good seeing your debt go down. It feels good, but it can't be emotional. I hope that helps, Cal.
Oh yeah, these are some really great points. I hadn't really thought too much about this, but putting that together, it sounds like, it's doable, and
It is
a framework. So
Jessica, you're exactly right. If it's very doable. That's the key. It's consistency. Wealth is built automatically, consistency over time. But there's a lot of outside pressure saying, no, you got to pay down the debt. Because think about the interests. As an advisor, we hear this a lot. Like when a client needs to protect their income, and they'll come to me because I'm not an insurance agent, but I'm fully licensed. But they'll say, Davin, everything is kind of hinging on my ability to practice. So the fact that I've got $500,000 invested in my ability to be a dentist or their subspecialty. I need to protect it. So they'll come to me to help them secure something called disability income. There are insurance agents out there, they're shooting for cruises. So it's good to ask the question of like, well, what are your interests? But when it comes to debt, banks, federal government for that matter, they all have an interest in you paying them back sooner and at a greater rate. They all do. And if you just give your same example and lend $100 to your friend and they say, all right, I'll give you $10 over the next 10 months. You go, okay. 5 months in, they're like, here's the rest of it. You're like, oh, sweet. That's no, drag it out 10 months. No, you'd love to get it back early. So do the lending institutions. So you have to kind of think, how can I set myself up and stay in control? So good. I'm glad that helped.
Yeah. So I had a question about retirement. Do you have plans that you would recommend? Do you suggest opening a Roth IRA during school or residency?
Great question. And just to make sure that to level set for the audience, Jessica, when it comes to saving, remember, we just talked about the time horizon. Really, time horizon you have to answer that question first. When I'm setting money aside, or if a client is setting money aside, the question I ask is, when do you want to access this? And if the answer is, I don't need to touch it until I'm 60, okay, then that actually opens up a list of choices, things like a Roth IRA. IRA, of course, just individual retirement account. So for the audience who's like, what's a Roth? A Roth IRA is money that you have, the IRS has already been dealt with. You've already paid taxes on it, presumably. Maybe a parent gifted it to you, but you don't have to pay taxes on this money. You can put it into a Roth IRA. And a Roth IRA is nothing more than just a cup. And in that cup, you could put mutual funds. I suppose you could do individual stocks, but steer clear of individual stocks, just mutual funds, which is a group of stocks. And as that money grows, the IRS can't touch it. So an investor's best friend is compounding interest, right? Everything you invest in is probably going to have a tax consequence. You so much as have a house, you have real estate taxes every year. If you have a savings account and if you so much as earn $3 on it, you're going to be taxed. So the advantage of a Roth is money grows uninterrupted, but here's the catch. You can't touch it till you're 60 years old. There are some rules, and if you're in distress or emergency healthcare, yes, but the mentality of the dentist is, I'm putting money in, I won't touch it until I'm 60. Great, and it just rolls. The consideration, and so that's a wonderful vehicle. And then when you pull it out, by the way, it's tax-free. You do not pay any taxes. So I love the Roth IRA. While in dental school or in residency, this is now going to seem almost contradictory, just given what we talked about of invest early. But when you transition out of training, Jessica, I would say first make sure you're in a good cash position, because the expenses of getting your licensing or maybe having to pay some bills before your first paycheck comes in, I would say that trumps investing in a Roth. It's great if you can, but it probably won't be the reason that one Roth contribution or two Roth contributions probably won't be the reason that you have this long sustaining retirement. It's great because it gets you started, but I would say cash is such a priority coming out of training that The Roth is really just, I don't need this money till I'm 60, and then, okay, go for it. Then I would say absolutely. Any retirement vehicle, 401k, simple IRA, SEP IRA, Roth IRA, IRA. Those are, I mean, that's quite a list, but all of them are the same. They're all related, of the same family, meaning when you put money in, you can't touch it till you're 60, or it's very punitive, 10% penalty plus your taxes. So oftentimes you have the dentist with cash, and then they're really getting going on their retirement, but there's nothing in between. Like, what about when you're 35 or 40 or 45 or 50? You're still a decade away from being able to access that. So there is a tremendous merit to having kind of some middle ground. So I do see kind of the progression of, if someone is a good saver, 20%, they'll put an emphasis on cash, and they'll get something going in the long term, like formal retirement, but they'll also get that middle ground going. And that's just called a brokerage account. A brokerage account is nothing more than your opportunity to invest in mutual funds, but it allows you to kind of reach in and pull money back without being penalized and feeling guilty and all this kind of stuff. So you can say, we need a middle ground. So that needs to be developed so that your retirement plan is untouched. You know, it's interesting when you look at people between the ages of 20 and 30, 31 and 40, and then 41 and 50. The IRS collects well over $50 million a year. You can go to irs.gov and look at it. They collect, I mean, millions in penalties of people dipping into their 401k or retirement plans too early. And we often think, oh, I bet that age group, 20 to 30, they're probably the biggest culprits. It's actually between the ages of 41 and 50. They're the biggest culprits of dipping in because they did a great job, good intention, but they have a child getting married, or they have a parent they have to take care of. And they're just thinking, I have no other account to tap into. I guess I got to tap into my 401k. So you've got to have that balance. I hope that answers. And I love the Roth, by the way. I'm a huge fan.
These are all great tips. Davin, thank you so much for sharing these. What are some of the I wish I would have, or I wish I should have, or I wish I shouldn't have kind of pitfalls that we should avoid when we start saving and when we start making money straight out of dental school, or even during dental school? What are some pitfalls we should avoid?
That's a great question. And I think that I think the biggest pitfall is just kind of falling into that trap that once I pay down debt, I'll feel so much better. I mean, it just dominates the thoughts that I think that, to me, Kel, is probably the biggest pitfall. There's some other things, you know, when people get into, they open up a Robinhood account, or they kind of, whatever the kind of the investment du jour, Bitcoin is a big one, you know, that we all hear about, cryptocurrencies. Usually people that kind of get into that stuff, what they're really telling you is they just hate their job and they want the lottery ticket to get them out of it. I mean, it's tough, right? I mean, you just think dentistry is hard. You've got litigation, patients that you don't, you know, the tough thing about dentistry, whoever comes through the door, you're going to take care of them. And then it's the personality that you have to kind of deal with afterwards. You know, in my career, I do get to kind of pick and choose who I work with. And I love working with lots of different folks, but you guys, there is such a level of, you know, just, you talk about asset protection or just that liability, that you just think, I'm going to invest in something, not a scheme, but just like, if this hits, I'm out. Like, that's kind of the mentality. So I would say just be disciplined, get good cash, make sure you manage your debts. And as the more that you turn things on automated, people say, well, Davin, I like to see myself, I'll move the money. I'll do it because I'm a control freak. But technology makes it such that you should be the air traffic controller. So kind of like Zoom, where I've got my square and you've got yours, Cal, and Jessica, you have yours. You should just be logging in and making sure everything moves. You're the air traffic controller. I think worrying about budgeting right out of the gates, a big pitfall is when people get married. That finances, again, everyone comes to different places on how they grew up, how their parents dealt with money. Did they gamble it away? Did they spend it? Were they such aggressive savers that spending $1 was evil. I mean, there's lots of different dynamics that couples have to then deal with. And I think that this, if I may kind of go down the marriage track here for a second, because this is a big one, is should we be sharing checking accounts and all that kind of stuff? Again, as I mentioned earlier, the savings rate is a rallying cry. It doesn't matter. Your checking account is your operational. Paychecks come in, bills go out, full stop. Like, there you go. It comes in. But every household, individual or married, should have a separate savings account online, high yield. There's things like Marcus, Capital One 360, Ally. That's the rallying cry. And you'll find out that dentists who are disciplined are very particular about what cash they have when they're first building it. So another pitfall is just kind of building up a giant savings account like a silo. And then all of a sudden you spend some money and anxiety goes up. So I want that silo dumped on its side and in a separate high yield savings account. These savings accounts are great. They're free. They're FDIC insured, and they should have no minimums. So I don't mind sharing. I bank at Wells Fargo. Always in the news for the wrong reasons. I'm like, oh, and there they go again. But my wife has a checking account of 17 years. I have a checking account. It doesn't matter how we spend, because we peel out 20%. That goes into the central savings account. And in it, we have a 6-month emergency reserve, as do all my clients. They have a vacation account. They have a house account. They have their next car purchase account. It's very specific. So when we take our 3 daughters on a vacation, we drain the vacation account. Nothing else is disrupted. Like dominoes, they're all still standing. They're all still standing. So how you manage your cash is going to depend right out of the gates. You must do it early. The pitfall is, well, I'll do it after I've been working a year. I'll do it after I've been working 2 years. All of a sudden, 5 years goes by, you can't save 20%, and it's just life has gotten out of control. So setting up that savings account sets the tone. It sets the tone, and then you're off and running.
Right, these are some fantastic strategies that you've given us so far, but I would love to hear your opinion on why would it be important for a clinician to be financially healthy, and what does that mean in terms of maybe the ethics of being a dentist?
Oh, great question. Like, why is that even important?
Yes.
That's an excellent question, because when you have the finances, I mean, again, it's the root of it. It can be a feeling of I've got everything taken care of. When you're financially healthy, we talk about kind of quieting that noise. When you are financially healthy, you're on a path to good cash. You're on a path to bring down your debt. Now, it's going to take a lot of hard work, but you can think clearly. You can make good business decisions, and you can make good personal decisions. With today's technology, like relationships, you can have hidden savings accounts. And I can open up a checking, credit card, or a savings account, and my spouse be none the wiser. When it comes to business, I think that I've seen dentists, clinicians make reaction. When we're up against the wall, we might change our business model and rationalize. Human beings have incredibly fast minds. Like, well, this is why I'm going to do it this way. And really at the root of it is I'm trying to get myself out of debt. I can't help a patient if I can't pay my bills. So I think that if you put yourself on a good path, then you're always in a position to say, I'm doing right, not only for myself, but I'm doing right by my patients. So I think that's so vital. It's so vital. I hope that answers, Jessica.
Yeah. Oh yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. The stress, when people look at businesses breaking apart, or finance, personal relationships breaking apart, money is going to be at the center. It's going to be a part of it. There's just going to be a center. We think once we make 150, once I make 200,000, once I make 250, everything else will be better. That's a journey to get there, but you have to deal with what you have now. And the greatest inflection is once you leave training or like residency fellowship, and you start making an income. It's going to be the greatest income jump. And those, by baking in that disciplined savings habits and being very resolute on your debt elimination, that's where it's going to start. Starts right away.
Thank you so much, Davin. Yeah, the ethics of it are so important. I think patients should want their dentist to be financially stable, because then they don't feel like the dentist is looking at them like a big money grab to resolve their issues financially.
Right.
What I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, Kel, I mean, you're exactly right. Can you imagine? And I've been referred to and talked to dentists. There was a maxillofacial surgeon where they were going down the path of bankruptcy. Just made some bad investments within the practice and hired some bad folks, and all of a sudden things were just going really sideways really quickly. And what people don't realize is, as much as you want to keep that private, it will get out. I mean, if you file bankruptcy or you short sell your house, as an example, that's public record. That's out there. And to your point, if I'm a patient and I'm reading, like, as sad as it is that, boy, they filed bankruptcy, but I promise you, I'm not going to that dentist because I'm thinking they are not thinking clearly. They're in a fog. They've got a lot of personal stuff going on. So I might go elsewhere. So it is very important that you kind of run a well-rounded life. Now, relationships can go south, and I fully appreciate that. I get that. But you can minimize some of that by keeping your finances in perfect order.
Thank you, Davin.
Yeah. Can I add one more thing to that too? I think when we look at like what you consume and what you drive and where you live, I've seen younger, you talk about the pitfalls. I've seen younger dentists, buy that BMW or Mercedes, and they're like, because I've made it. I want people to know that I'm successful. Here's the reality. Successful people know that was just a big expense. It is no indication of where you are, financially. So avoid that. Delayed gratification doesn't like, all right, I went through 4 years of dental school and training. Now I can make the big purchase. No, you have like 4 years of recovery. Nobody really cares what you drive. In fact, if you park a big fancy car, a Corvette, a Mercedes, that patient is even thinking, is that your car? And the license plate is Dr. Teeth or something like that. Or they're going to be thinking, all right, this doctor might be charging me a little more just to cover. Am I making his car payment? Like, what's going on? So, because cars are beautiful machines, but you've got to be really careful coming out of the gates and making those purchases to give the illusion you're doing better than maybe you are. Usually that's where that stuff starts. Same with housing. Here's a good rule of thumb. When you're looking at buying a house, stay within 2 to 2.5 times your household gross income, and you won't be house poor. Stay within 2 to 2.5 times. Renting is not throwing away money. It's not throwing away money. The National Association of Realtors would say you have to own a home for 5 years just to break even on realtor fees and closing costs. So stay within 2 to 2.5 times, which I know for our friends in Manhattan and San Francisco doesn't get you much, but that's the reality. So be patient with that. Be patient with home ownership, especially when you're talking about buying into a practice. Not to take us in a different topic.
So, Davin, what does house poor mean? Or what do you mean by investment is better, a house or a practice? Can you elaborate on that?
I can, absolutely. So a house is an asset, but it is not an investment. So understanding the differences, because HDTV is going to have you thinking something different. So stay within that 2 to 2.5 times, right? So if I'm making 200,000, if I'm making 150, my spouse is making 50,000. The household income is 200,000. If I want to buy a $400,000 or a $500,000 home, great, go for it. If I want to buy a $510,000 home, I'm disproportionately spending too much. I just am. And it's okay. You're making a judgment call. And if you go beyond that limit, so long that you can save 20%, then I suppose it doesn't really matter. Like, you're just choosing to spend more in the house. But then if also vacationing and also saving for kids' college, like you're making a value decision. But it's an asset, Kel, right? So House poor means it's not just being able to manage the mortgage payment, but it's rising property taxes. It's the maintenance of that house. So that's where people could be like, man, a lot of my earnings is just going to take care of this house, as opposed to being able to do other things, being able to travel, to pick up a flight and go somewhere for a long weekend, just to decompress. So that's why I say you got to stay within 2 to 2.5 times. When it comes to buying into a practice or buying a practice, a bank sees your student loan as an investment, even though it's charging 7%. So if I have a $500,000 student loan at 7%, the bank is not going to be as worried as if I have a $500,000 mortgage at 3%. They're going to say that bothers us because you've got to take care of that thing, and it's a rising expense. Your student loan is the reason you're making the money you're making, and that is on the descent. So they see that as a return on investment, an asset that you have to service. So if you're going to buy into a practice or take out money, you have to approach a bank. I would be talking very directly with that bank, but I wouldn't buy the house first. Get into the practice, take out the business loan first, then buy the house when possible, right? Sometimes it doesn't always work, but you want at least a 9 to 12 month gap there, because the bank needs to see, okay, they took out a home loan. Now they've serviced it for 9 to 10 months. Okay, we feel a little more comfortable, but it can't be like I'm buying a house this year and then I'm going to also buy into a practice. Whoa, hold on, pump the brakes. Let's get into the practice first, then buy the house. I hope that helps.
For sure. So I had another question about if you are a dentist and you're looking to vet a financial advisor, what things should you be looking for? What questions might you ask them before making that decision?
Great question, Jessica. A financial advisor is a relationship, right? It's a sounding board. They're not there to tell you how to spend their money, but they need to understand. I would want my advisor to specialize in working with dentists. That'd be my first and foremost, because they need to understand the student loan component, the bank loan component, what insurances are going to be important to me, right? That all that stuff is going to matter. So number one, I'd want them to specialize in me. Number two, I would want them to be independent. So here's what I mean by that. Anybody can call themselves an advisor. CPA might call themselves an advisor, and that's okay. But in the industry as a whole, there's really 3 channels that an advisor can fall into, and you can go into any interview and say, I'm just curious, which channel do you fall into? Are you captive? Meaning I'm an advisor, but I work for an insurance company, which the insurance companies aren't bad. I mean, if you watch college football this afternoon, you're going to see, Allstate and Northwestern Mutual, and these are great companies. But if I'm an advisor working for an insurance company, I have a moral obligation to sell their stuff. They're the ones providing my benefits and my salary. So that's going to kind of take center stage. So it's not bad, but I just want to know where their incentive is. So that's on one side. Then over here on the other side is what I'll call wirehouse. These are the Merrill Lynch's, Goldman Sachs, right? Those kinds of firms. Not bad, but they work for a bank. Bank of America is Merrill Lynch, right? They're all one now. And banks survive and make a living based on deposits. So you have the insurance person saying, let's get you into some insurance, and then we can start talking about investments. The wirehouse is saying, let me get your assets so I can charge you a percent. And then if you need insurances, I suppose I can probably figure out a way to do it. The independent advisors in this middle column, they're not tied to any insurance company. They're not tied to any bank. They are truly independent. So we can have very candid conversations about what role do insurances play? Is life insurance something that needs to be dealt with? Is disability income protection something that needs to be dealt with? Malpractice. What about tail coverage? What is umbrella? So I need my advisor to be able to talk candidly about insurances without feeling like they're being sold something. None of my clients want to be sold. What they want is they need good information, knowing that I'm not shooting for a cruise in January. But I would want to know, and by the way, if your advisor receives commission from those insurances, that's fine. All my clients are like, yeah, Davin, if you help me get disability, I know there's a commission there. But every state, by the way, has an insurance commissioner. Those commissions are exactly the same. They're the same. The difference is I don't work for them, so they need to incentivize their salespeople with the trips. That's why they get the trips. They're like, okay, you're going to get paid the same as the guy like Davin. But my clients want me to be able to shop the market. They want me to be able to go out and say, let's get the best, whether that's an investment or an insurance, because these are really good tools that help you accelerate your plan, your path to financial independence. It also helps protect. So we need to have those discussions without feeling sold. If you feel like your advisor is selling you something, that's a problem. When you talk about fees, so an advisor says, I charge a fee or I don't charge a fee. There's lots of different models out there. You just have to be comfortable with it. You just have to be comfortable. And if you're okay paying a fee, great. I know for younger dentists who are, what I call emerging, like they're in their 30s and they're up and coming. Here's my opinion. So I'm always assuming, and I sit on a board of about 5,500 of my peer group in the industry, and there's only 12 of us. So, but here's my controversial opinion. Paying a 1% fee when you're in your 30s, maybe even early 40s, in my opinion, may not be appropriate. I'm very careful to say may not, because there are circumstances where it is. But when you are young and making your investments, you're in a buy and hold scenario. To pay someone a 1% management fee, like at a bank, to me is like, you can do it, but it's an added expense that you have to now overcome within the portfolio. Because buying and hold just takes time. So I can share, and I don't want this to be a sales pitch on Davin, but because there's more of me out there, but we don't charge a fee in those places because you're just trying to incubate. We're just trying to grow. Where you pay someone a percent of assets is for sure in retirement. So I've got 65, 70-year-old dentists. When we pull money out of their portfolio to live on, you are by definition out of balance. So I need to be in there working it. But mutual funds on their own are going to have expenses, mutual funds being a group of stocks. So it's not that these are done for free. It's a very small margin. So when my clients are investing and they're young, those expenses are the same with me or without me. They could go open a retail account and do all the same investing, but they want me there because it's in accordance to their plan. Always, it has to be in accordance to their plan. So they want me there and active. So there is some income, but the play is I need to be with my advisor and build a relationship. That is at its core. If you don't feel like your advisor's listening to you and out for your best interest, go say thanks for the memories, tip the cap, and be on your way. Does that help,
David?
Jessica? Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely helps. Everything's so complicated. We could listen to this 100 times. I'm sure we'd still walk away with questions.
Yes.
We've talked about characteristics such as discipline. What are some other characteristics that you would suggest that a new graduate should have to be the most financially successful and stable in the shortest amount of time? And then maybe summarize and give us some of your big takeaways from what we've talked about today that you would like the audience to know walking away from this.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So I think central to all this is if someone's coming away there, because there's so much, and I could respect the fact that someone's going to be like, well, that makes sense to me, but that one didn't because it doesn't pertain to me. So while you're all kind of coming out of the same pool, your situations are going to be a little nuanced. So having a plan matters, meaning what's the roadmap for you, Jessica, specifically, Kel, for you specifically, or anybody else listening? What's your plan as it relates to cash, debt, future debts, mortgages, business loans, right? And then things that might change, might get married. Some of us might get divorced. What happens then? Children, do we save for their college, not save for their college? So I think oftentimes we think finding an advisor is when I have six figures or when I'm, making a certain dollar amount. Candidly, I would say put some time and effort to finding someone that you can really sit down with and kind of talk this out and start establishing a relationship. It matters. It really does, because we're emotional human beings. We're too close to the fire. We need someone to say, that's fine. Let's look at the alternative. So that's just, I really would. And I know that sounds self-serving, but it doesn't, you don't have to call me. Just, talk to somebody. So I really don't mean it to be self-serving, but they can really lay out a plan. But if you're going to kind of bootstrap this and say, okay, I'm going to do this on my own, then if I were to summarize, I would kind of encourage people to think about your finances as a triangle, and focus that first 2 years on this foundational piece. And there's 3 critical things in the foundation of that triangle that your first 24 months you're going to spend on. Remember, this is a marathon. I know quick as possible is relative. Your quick, my quick is going to be different than Jessica's quick. So when you think about this triangle, the 2 cornerstones, if there's 3 boxes, the first cornerstone, build cash. That will quiet your noise. So first paycheck, 20% savings, put it into cash. Now you're going to have expenses. So I'll talk to a dentist who's been, they've been out for 6 months. They go, David, I'm super frustrated. I'm saving, but I had to put a down payment on my apartment. I had to get my licensing done. Right. So I understand that, but 24 months of saving, your income's like the tide. It's just going to keep coming in. Now, if in 24 months, you still don't have a 6-month reserve, then yes, you have a spending problem. Then we need to talk like that. Now we've identified it. We got the issue. So get to that 6-month reserve. So important. This middle section is the spine of your financial plan. These are the things. This answers the question, if this breaks, am I financially compromised forever? There's 7 insurances in there, 7, which seems like a lot. But when someone's dependent on you, a bank or a loved one, you'll have life insurance, health insurance, obviously your home and auto. Umbrella is like an asset protection. I won't get into great detail, but there's more to it than just having renters and auto insurance. There's something called umbrella. So again, you want to talk to somebody independent who can help turn the lights on for that one. Liability insurance is if you buy a practice, you own the building, you own your equipment, right? So there's liability considerations, disability insurance, and malpractice. That's probably going to be it. People insure like their cell phones. You don't have to, you can, I get it. They're like $1,000 machines, but if that breaks, it doesn't mean you can't retire. It's unfortunate, but it doesn't mean you can't retire. So insure the things that are going to come into your blind spot: your health, your life, your income, your malpractice insurance. Those are your criticals, right? Think of that as the spine of your plan. It's going to keep you propped up. And then debt, use the debt, use that debt management, use the 8% rule. Any debt at 8 and above, attack it. Any debt at 7, 6, and 3, it's probably on a schedule, Kel. So I would say just manage the schedule, accelerate where you can. If you just stick to that foundation, you'll be able to build on top of that. Don't get ahead of yourselves, because when you do, you could end up taking more damage. I mean, you could take more steps back. A quick story just to kind of summarize this is I was talking with, and still talk to, a dentist who's 67. He worked for a large multi-specialty. He worked for a large multi-specialty when I first met him. He was 57 years old. They had a mandatory age 65 retirement. Mandatory. Can't work here past 65. When he got out of dental school, he believed paying off his student loans was the right thing. Well, nobody would question that either. I think it's the right thing to do as well. But as we've now talked tonight or this afternoon, timing matters. But he started hustling down his student loans. Now, not the same balance that you guys have these days, but it's all relative. So he's paying it down. Then he got married, and he did not come from money. Neither did his wife. They got married, had the big wedding, went on the honeymoon. So he's like, I had to pay that off. So muscled that down. And then he's working his tail off. And then she gets pregnant with their first daughter. So he thought, you know what? I want to bring her home to a house. If you look at mortgage rates today, they're like 3%. If you look at mortgage rates in 1987, 1988, they're 12 and 15% for a mortgage. I mean, just ridiculous. So now he has this mortgage. He's hustling down the mortgage. Student loans are gone. Their second daughter is born. Now they need the bigger family car. So they're budgeting to pay off the car and the mortgage. And one of them had health issues. And everything was about the dollar. When they were 8 and 10 years old, the daughters, they end up getting a divorce. And he will tell you today, if this doctor was on this call, he would say, for sure, everything was about money. Everything was about the budget. So now fast forward, he's 57 years old, and I'm meeting him for the first time at this practice. I gave a presentation on retirement, and I made the comment, it's okay to have debt in retirement. And he bristled. So he pulled me aside and said, I'm debt-free, David, 57. And he told me what I just shared you. Fought all his way through, put both of his daughters through college, because in his household, no debt. So he's 57, debt-free. Like, that's amazing. I'm curious, how much is in your retirement plan? And he said, I've got like 118,000. I was like, wow, that's a little anemic. Well, what else do you have? And he's like, no, that's it. I'm like, well, where's all your money? He said, well, I just said, trying to pay down all these debts. He did get remarried. His new bride had like 8,000 of credit card debt, which he wiped off, but then they bought their new house. So he said, so that's where I'm at. So fast forward when he's 62 and I go to visit him on the cardiac floor. He had his heart cleaned out. He's totally fine. His cardiologist is like, your heart's going to last longer than your mind, which I thought was kind of a weird joke for someone who just had heart surgery. But I'm there visiting with him for a few minutes and a woman walks in. Right across she goes right to that grease board usually they have on. And she's like, did you eat yet today? Did you get your medication? Is the attending going to let you go today or tomorrow? Rapid fire questions. And he's like, whoa, Davin, let me introduce you to somebody. I'm like, oh, great. He said, this is my mother. She's my greatest fear. I thought it's a weird way to introduce your mother. Why is she your greatest fear? He said, she's my greatest fear because she's 92 years old. I have mandatory retirement at age 65. What if I live another 30 years? So now he's 65. He did retire from that practice, but he's still practicing. He will probably work till he's 72. And he tells me, he said, there's so much stuff out there about pay down your debt. You'll pay less interest. That's the Holy Grail. And he said, I did it. And it felt good until I realized I totally ignored the other side of the coin. And I've got peers who are retiring and they had to accept the fact that I may have debt a little bit longer than I want to. And that takes the discipline. So that time value of money to me is so central to any dentist's health that it kind of dictates everything, because there's any dentist you talk to, I would challenge, even go to an attending and just say, if you're in your 60s, what would you do differently in your 30s or 40s? You'll get some great stories. Like, I shouldn't have been in a timeshare, or I bought a fancy car, but somewhere in there, they'll say, I wish I would have started saving earlier. I don't know what I was doing. I wish I started earlier.
All right, Davin. Well, thank you so much for this really, really valuable presentation on all things money with how it relates to dentistry. We learned so much from you. We really appreciate you taking the time to come and speak with us.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me, you guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much.